Somewhere in your house, there is a photo of you before you could walk. You are smiling at someone. You clearly love them. You have no idea who they are. Your parents remember that day in perfect detail. You remember nothing. Not the room, not the voice, not even the feeling. This isn't because your first 2 or 3 years were boring. They weren't. You learned to recognize faces, understand language, and stand upright on 2 legs. One of the hardest physical skills a human ever masters. And yet, none of it stuck. So where did it go? For a long time, the easy answer was that babies simply don't have working memory. Their brains are too immature to store anything. But that answer turned out to be wrong. And the real one is stranger. Babies do form memories. Researchers have proven it again and again. Infants as young as 6 months old can remember a toy, a face, a sequence of actions, sometimes for weeks. Developmental psychologist Carolyn Roby Collier spent decades studying this using a simple method. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging overhead. Kick your leg, the mobile moves. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months old learned this fast and remembered it days later when placed back under the same mobile. Their legs started kicking before the ribbon even moved. The memory was there. It was accessible. It worked. So the problem isn't storage. The problem is retrieval. Here's where it gets stranger. You didn't lose your baby memories the way you lose a memory of what you had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. You lost almost all of them, all at once, in a kind of quiet wipe that finishes somewhere around age 3 or 4. Scientists call this infantile amnesia, and it happens to every human being who has ever lived, in every culture, on every continent. Why would evolution build a brain that erases its own early records? One clue comes from the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for stitching moments into long-term memories. At birth, it is nowhere near finished. It keeps generating new neurons well into early childhood, and that process, called neurogenesis, doesn't just add new cells. It appears to disrupt the ones already there. Neuroscientist Paul Franklin ran an experiment on mice that made this vivid. He took infant mice, let them form a fear memory, then either sped up or slowed down the rate of neurogenesis in their hippocampus. When he sped it up, the mice forgot faster. When he slowed it down, they remembered longer. The very same process your brain uses to grow new memory-making machinery seems to overwrite the memories that machinery just built. Think about that for a second. Your brain wasn't failing to remember your early life. It was actively renovating the building the memories were stored in, and the renovation knocked the furniture off the shelves. But neurogenesis alone doesn't explain everything. There's a second piece, and it has nothing to do with biology and everything to do with language. Psychologist Catherine Nelson proposed that autobiographical memory, the kind where you can mentally travel back and say, "That happened to me, in that place, at that time," depends on narrative structure. And narrative structure depends on language. A toddler doesn't just need words. They need the concept of a story, with a beginning, a self as the main character, and a timeline connecting past to present. Before that scaffolding exists, experiences can still register, the way the mobile study proved. But they don't get filed the way adult memories do. There's no folder to put them in yet. So when the folder finally appears, around the same age the amnesia lifts. Everything filed before it is essentially unreachable, not because it was deleted, but because the address system for finding it didn't exist yet. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature, and you're still living inside its effects. Watch how a 2-year-old melts down over a broken cracker as though it's the end of the world, then forgets it happened by dinner. That intensity without permanence isn't a malfunction. It may be exactly what a developing brain needs. Full emotional engagement with the present moment without every microcrisis calcifying into a lifelong memory. Imagine if you actually remembered, in vivid emotional detail, every fall, every tantrum, every moment of confusion from your first 3 years. You'd be carrying an almost unbearable weight of unprocessed, pre-verbal panic into adulthood. Instead, evolution appears to have built in a kind of mercy. The early years get lived at full intensity and then quietly archived in a format your adult mind can no longer open. And this is where the ancient mirrors the modern more directly than you might expect. You still do a smaller version of this every single day. You've forgotten almost the entire drive to work today. You've forgotten most of what you said in casual conversation this week. Your brain is constantly deciding in real time what deserves a permanent file and what gets quietly discarded. And it is making that decision using the same basic principle it used when you were 2. Does this matter enough? Does it connect to a self and a story worth keeping? Most of what happens to you right now, this week, is being infantile amnesia'd in miniature. There's also something worth noticing in what does survive from early childhood. Ask most adults for their earliest memory, and you'll rarely get something ordinary. You'll get a hospital visit, a house fire, the birth of a sibling, a moment of real fear or real wonder. The mundane gets erased by design. Only the emotionally loaded survives the wipe, if anything does at all. Which means the story you tell about your earliest years isn't a transcript. It's a highlight reel, assembled after the fact from whatever debris happened to survive the renovation. So the photo of baby you, smiling at someone whose name you'll never recover, isn't evidence that something went wrong. It's evidence that something went exactly as it was built to. Your brain was under construction, tearing down and rebuilding its own memory system while you were living inside it, and it chose, without asking you, to protect your ability to grow over your ability to remember growing. You are, right now, still that same brain. Still building. Still quietly deciding what gets to last and what gets let go. The only difference is that now, for better or worse, you're finally old enough to notice it happening. Somewhere in your house there is a photo of you before you could walk. You'll never remember that moment, but in a very real sense, that moment is the reason you remember anything at all.